Joining us now from Florida with the Trump campaign's viewpoint is Mike Huckabee, the former presidential candidate, Arkansas governor, and Fox News contributor. And, Governor, let's get right to it. Let's start with what Donald Trump calls a softening of his position on illegal immigration. Of course, the press is questioning whether he's changing his position, because now he's talking about following the law, but more aggressively, kicking out criminals, having others pay back taxes, but not rounding up 11 million people in this country illegally. Your thoughts?
Well, I think what Donald Trump has done, he's stuck to his guns on the idea that we're going to have a border, we're going to enforce the border. That hasn't changed at all. I think the one thing that you could say is that he realizes that it's utterly impractical to try to deport 11 million people just to round them up. That's not going to happen. And it's not going to happen because we physically, I don't think, could manage that. This is not a change of his basic fundamental view that America has a right to dictate who comes into this country and to have a door that has a lock on it and that you invite people in and you know who's coming. And that hasn't changed, and I think the press trying to make him out to be some flip-flopper is frankly absurd.
Well, let me play for you just a brief clip from a presidential debate last February when the candidate said this.
We have at least 11 million people in this country that came in illegally. They will go out. They will come back. Some will come back, the best, through a process.
Now, that was his position when you ran against him for president. Now, you say it's utterly unrealistic to be seeking out and rounding up 11 million people. That was a criticism made at the time. Why does your candidate, Donald Trump, not just say, I've consulted, I've looked into this, and I realize that's not realistic, and so I'm going to do it a different way? Instead, there's this insistence that, oh, the position hasn't really changed.
Well, I think in quite, to be fair to Donald Trump, it's not that his position has changed. What he was saying there, that people will go back, they'll come in and make sure that they should come in, talk about whether they have to go back to get in the line to come back in. Is that deportation, or is that going through a process? One of the reasons, Howard, that candidates don't like to give details and deep policy position papers that are 50 pages long is because all it does is invite an extraordinary scrutiny and nitpicking on the details. So better to keep it general, and I think Donald Trump is learning that lesson as a candidate.
Well, I'm in favor of scrutiny, not necessarily nitpicking.
I think that's...
All right. Let me turn you to something else. I have a few more questions I want to get to. A few weeks ago, you sat in for Sean Hannity and interviewed Donald Trump, and you announced to the audience, you're not a journalist, you're there as a supporter, but you worked at Fox, and you were kind of in the host role, and that drew some criticism.
Well, look, I never pretend to be a journalist. I wish some of the other people. How does George Stephanopoulos pretend to be a journalist? He worked for Bill Clinton. He was in the White House. How does Chris Matthews pretend to be a journalist? He worked for Democrat politicians.
Well, in fairness to both of them,
I'm a commentator.
That was a couple of decades ago, and they've since been in journalism. I understand the criticism of both of them. I understand you're a commentator, so let me have you commentate on this. Trump has been now talking about outreach to the black community. His poll numbers with the African-American voters are not very good. He's taken a lot of heat from the press, particularly liberal pundits, for saying things like, you all live in poverty, your schools are no good, what have you got to lose? What is your thought about this outreach and why he's drawn more criticism than praise for it?
I think he's drawing criticism because he's telling the truth. One of the reasons that I ended up getting 48% of the African-American vote in Arkansas as a Republican gubernatorial candidate was because I was very honest and blunt, and I went out and said to people in the African-American community, you guys 100% virtually support Democrats. What comes of that? Are things better for you? And the answer was no. There was nothing that they could really point to and say, boy, this has really worked out for us. On the other hand, I said, if you give your votes automatically to the Democrats, they're not going to do a thing for you because they don't have to get your votes. And Republicans won't do anything for you because they know that if they do, it's not going to make any difference. I said, become a voting bloc that everybody has to work for and fight for and be a part of helping, and then your votes really do matter in a much bigger way. And I think that's what Donald Trump was saying, and it's absolutely 100% the truth.
All right, we've got about half a minute. Let me leave you with this question. With Trump down in many swing state polls, I know in the national polls he's come back a bit and the race is tightening. Most of the press now assumes Hillary Clinton will win. There have been stories about her White House agenda and her transition team. What do you make of this media attitude? You go to the New York Times website, it's a graphic every day. Hillary Clinton, 90% chance of winning.
Well, if anybody denies that the mainstream media is totally in the tank for Hillary, they're living in a fantasy land. They probably have a unicorn ranch, and they believe in the tooth fairy. It's just absurd for us to deny that there is a concerted effort to try and discredit Donald Trump. But Donald Trump doesn't have to win over the mainstream media. Donald Trump has to win over a lot of working-class people who have been greatly hurt by the policies of Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. And that's what this race will come down to, Howard.
All right, Governor Mike Huckabee joining us from Florida this Sunday. Thanks very much for being here.